tonight.
We add value to one another's products alongside one another, not in spite of one another.
Premier Scott Moe will head south to make the case for ongoing trade with Saskatchewan. More affordable housing is on the horizon for Saskatoon. And a Saskatchewan skier hits the podium in World Cup moguls.
This is CBC Saskatchewan News.
It's Friday, February 7th, and welcome to the CBC Saskatchewan News. Hi there, everyone. I'm Dan Plaster. Canada's premiers will head to Washington next week. The goal is to convince American politicians that Canada is better off without tariffs. Alexander Kwan has more on Premier Scott Moe's efforts.
Premier Scott Moe is heading south of the border, and as we learned Friday, he won't be traveling just to Washington, D.C. It's being billed as an opportunity to meet with American politicians and businesses with one message.
We add value to one another's products alongside one another, not in spite of one another. And most certainly that is a goal for us, and we would encourage all Canadians and everyone in North America to keep that in focus.
The U.S. is Saskatchewan's largest trading partner, but Moe says it's important to diversify the province's imports, exports, and investments. That's why he'll also head to other countries.
Mexico, for example, we're over $1 billion of exports, and that's new in the last few years, and it's an increasing value market for us. So I'm going to spend some time in that market.
And Moe promises he won't stop there. In the weeks ahead, Moe or other cabinet ministers will spend time within Canada and beyond to advocate for Saskatchewan. India, Japan, South Korea, and the United Arab Emirates were among the countries Moe mentioned as possible destinations. Opposition leader Carla Beck says the NDP is ready to provide a Team Saskatchewan approach with the government.
I remain focused on doing everything that we can to make this reprieve permanent. Again, even if it's 10% tariffs, that is going to have a terrible economic impact, not only to this province, but to our whole country.
Moe says he's also looking for results back home, calling for interprovincial trade barriers to be lifted as quickly as possible. Alexander Kwan, CBC News, Regina.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau issued a stark warning today during a Canada-U.S. economic summit in Toronto. He said Donald Trump is not joking when he says he wants Canada to become the 51st American state. CBC News captured part of a comment that was on a microphone that was left on after journalists had left the event.
Mr. Trump has it in mind that one of the easiest ways of doing that is absorbing our country. And it is a real thing. In my conversation with him,
Trudeau was addressing more than 100 business, labor, and political leaders gathered to talk about Trump's tariff threats and how to improve trade within Canada. Anita Anand was among several federal cabinet ministers at the event. She declared that there will be no messing around with the 49th parallel, period. They say those who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it, and that can be applied to the potential tariff war too. University of Regina history professor Raymond Blake spoke with the Morning Edition's Adam Hunter about the lessons we can take from history to approach this moment.
So the Americans always had this notion that European powers shouldn't be in North America. So Canada, when it became a separate nation in 1867, still had these ties to Great Britain. And even as late as 1920, the Canadians were preparing for an attack from the United States. But of course, that didn't happen. And quite often you would see the Americans, raising the issue, hey, how about Canada joining us? But it really did disappear. Certainly, after 1867, and really never came back. And no one talked about annexation. That was a word from the mid-19th century. So last, 150 years, that has been a non-starter.
It really seems to be catching people off guard a little bit with this continued discussion of the 51st state and annexation. And when you talk about other parts of the world where the U.S. has, let's say, taken over territories, they've never really discussed, as you said, Canada as an option. Just how rare is it for a country like Canada to be discussed in this way by a power like the U.S.?
Oh, I think it's very rare. And I think the Americans were always a little worried about certain things in Canada, one of which is where, you are today in Saskatchewan. And in the 1940s, this move towards the left, the socialists coming to power. And one of the things that the Americans were really concerned about is, we don't want the socialists, which they saw as communists, having, considerable influence in Canada. So the Americans were quite willing, say, during the Second World War, to make sure that the Canadian economy prospered, that they invested in Canada, that the Canadians would be just like them in many ways. And so the Americans were concerned about Canada, but certainly not to the point of invading. So this is very, very rare indeed.
Avian flu has made an appearance in cattle herds south of the border. No cases have been reported in Canadian cows yet, but the impact is still being felt here. Alexander Silberman reports.
Canadian dairy farms are ramping up surveillance after a new strain of bird flu was found in U.S. cattle.
We shouldn't panic. We have to watch out and try to keep birds away from the cattle and away from the feed. They're testing the animals coming in, testing milk.
The H5N1 virus has sickened dozens of people and millions of birds in the United States. But there's new concern after dairy cattle in Nevada were infected. Officials reporting milk samples detected the D1.1 variant of the virus.
Once it is in our dairy herds, it can cause significant amounts of damage.
In the U.S., the virus is reducing milk production and sending egg prices skyrocketing. So valuable that thieves stole 100,000 eggs in a Pennsylvania heist. A threat to food security, but also a concern for public health.
What's a bit unnerving is there's been a couple of cases, one in Canada and another in the United States, where it's not entirely clear what the source of infection was.
The D1.1 strain is the same version that landed a BC teenager in intensive care in November, the first human case of this variant caught in Canada. Health officials still don't know how she caught it, and in Louisiana, a man died after contracting the same strain.
We are now seeing multiple spillovers occurring in those dairy cattle.
This virologist says the risk is currently low to people who don't work with birds, but warns the illness could eventually spread between humans.
That is a potential pandemic in the making, and then the clock is really ticking to contain that initial cluster of cases before it can spread outward into the human population.
Infectious disease doctors say continuing milk testing is critical to stop any cases from spreading to humans. Alexander Silberman, CBC News, Toronto.
The city of Saskatoon is hoping to move forward with several new affordable housing projects. Liam O'Connor brings us more.
On Wednesday, a city committee recommended City Council approve all 3 developments totaling 256 units and the associated incentives to build them. In June last year, Council authorized the sale of city-owned land to build low-income housing. As an incentive to builders, the city offered $50,000 per unit and 5 years of incremental tax abatements. That'll be paid for with $15 million from the federal government's Housing Accelerator Fund. Applicants also have to keep units affordable for at least 20 years. The largest successful application comes from the 50-year-old Métis corporation, Camponi Housing. They're looking to build 120 units on a portion of 1635 McKercher Drive near the Lakewood Civic Center. Their plan includes wraparound supports, a community garden, daycare, and more. Camponi says their waiting list for affordable housing grows daily.
Currently, for our entire portfolio, we have over 800 individuals and families that are on our waiting list for any affordable housing that we have within our portfolio.
Another project, which is slightly smaller at 112 affordable units, is being proposed by the Saskatoon Open Door Society. It's aiming for a location downtown on the corner of 23rd Street East and 3rd Avenue North, where a gravel parking lot currently sits.
SODS is embarking on a transformative initiative to create Welcome Place, affordable housing community, a purpose-built centralized facility that integrates affordable housing with comprehensive community services.
The last project, located at the corner of Broadway Avenue and Ruth Street, is a for-profit build by a private business with only 24 units. All three projects are backed by an urban planning expert.
I think this is very promising to add this affordable housing in different areas of the city. And I'm very excited, particularly with the one that is going to be in the downtown.
Diab says compared to a parking lot, affordable housing downtown is a much greater benefit to the city. Liam O'Connor, CBC News, Saskatoon.
The snow has stopped falling across the province for now, but it did leave a beautiful marshmallow world in its wake. Will it be warm enough to use and enjoy this weekend? Well, Ethan Williams will return after the break to give us all the answers. Stick around. Welcome back. Round one of the battle between Canada and the United States over the looming tariffs is in the books. How did Premier Scott Moe do in this fight? Leader Post columnist Murray Mandrick joined the Morning Edition's Adam Hunter to chat about this.
What stood out for me was the immediate message after Saturday's alleged imposition of the tariffs that turned out to be for naught because they were quickly withdrawn. And we're going to get into the games that are getting played here in a second. But I thought Premier Moe was far too tepid, was tone deaf to the tone of everybody, not just in the province but in the country, that want strong leadership and want someone in a position of authority to call Donald Trump out, particularly on Donald Trump's untruths. And I think that this still remains a problem for Premier Scott Moe. However, in that message after on Saturday morning, there was one thing, and I think he said it before, and it fits into the theme of what is really going on, I think, in Washington, and other people smarter than I have talked about it, and I've talked about it today. But Premier Scott Moe talked about hearing how on a news panel someone say that you take Donald Trump seriously but not literally. And that's very much true. And we'll probably get into that in a moment as to why you don't quite take him literally and take him seriously. I think as a politician, what Scott Moe needs to do is to not take Donald Trump's truth seriously and literally. And I think that he needs to start calling them out on behalf of the Canadian population, starting with fentanyl, because the problem is not the fentanyl flowing south from Canada into the U.S. It's actually flowing north. The same thing is for immigration. It's the opposite problem with guns, though. We aren't exporting guns to the U.S., but we are sure getting a lot of guns up here from the U.S. Canadian politicians like Moe, while they're doing the right thing, I think, in terms of border security, because actually we need our borders protected from what's coming up from the U.S., and that is a good thing. But they need to make the point that they're doing this not because they're doing it at Donald Trump's behest, but because that we actually do have a problem with the U.S. and trade issues and things happening, and this is really a problem. I don't think it has really anything to do with the endless games that are being played by the Trump administration right now and their scattergun approach to everything.
When it comes to domestic policy and dealing with things that may help the economy here, there's been all this talk about breaking down trade barriers. We hear this, removing red tape. We've heard it from the Saskatchewan government for a long time. We had a guest on earlier who said that there doesn't seem to be a lot of this necessarily, that there's the U.S. partnership, there's these other deals that were made within Canada that seem to suggest that this isn't a major issue, but this is being touted by the opposition federal leader as being something that needs to be done. Just how much of an issue are internal trade barriers, internal issues within Canada holding us back from our economic prosperity, let's say?
I agree with Pierre Poilievre. I think this is an issue. It's been an issue with consecutive governments for years now. We have silly rules related to trucking and things like that. The weather in Canada does vary somewhat from place to place and season to season, obviously. But in terms of when you're a trucker going across the country, probably not all that much. I get that it's different driving a semi in downtown Toronto versus the prairies, and that's why we have different rules, because most of the semi owners in Saskatchewan happen to be farmers. But we need to basically account for things like that, so we have more easily an easier ability to trade from province to province, because that is holding us back. That's actually, is I think Pierre Poilievre pointed out in a recent video that this barrier is actually bigger than almost any other barrier internationally that we face. So let's deal with that. I don't know how we deal with that. We don't have a parliament sitting when we have a Liberal leadership that's going to choose the next prime minister and then probably an election, because it takes time to cut through this red tape. So I hope whomever comes in as the next federal government comes in with a more substantive plan to deal with all this.
Ethan Williams is now in, taking a look at the weather. And Ethan, how's this weekend looking?
Well, I think we're going to continue to see those sort of below seasonal temperatures, Dan, that we have seen over the latter part of this week here. Unfortunately, not a whole lot of relief coming, and some dangerous cold expected for portions of the province as we go Friday into Saturday. Extreme cold warnings extending through a good chunk of the eastern half of south and central Saskatchewan, including both Regina and Saskatoon, as those warnings extend all the way up into the Meadow Lake area. Wind chills likely going to be dropping around that -40 mark, or perhaps even a little bit below that. And of course, that means frostbite possible on exposed skin very quickly. So a heads up if you're heading out on a Friday night into early Saturday. Temperatures have actually been dropping for many of us through the day. Through the northern part of the province, these are generally where we've kind of landed into the afternoon. But for south and central, earlier on Friday, we had temperatures around -12 in Saskatoon, -14 in Regina. But throughout Friday, we've dropped back closer to that -20 mark in many locations. And you can kind of now see those blues and purples that represent where temperatures are beginning to fall. As those temperatures drop, though, which was thanks to a cold front, which is moving from north to south through the province, it is, however, clearing skies. And we have an area of high pressure, which is bringing those clear conditions through the province. And I think that clearing is going to continue as we head Friday night into Saturday. Kind of the center of that high pressure right over southern Saskatchewan as we get into early Saturday morning. That is helping to clear things, and that's what's going to make it really cold as we head overnight. That high pressure going to be a theme for us over these next few days, and likely for a good chunk of next week as well, as we see, again, not a whole lot of cloud cover to speak of. Except for Sunday, I think that's the best chance when we're going to start to see that move in again. Maybe a few flurries here and there throughout the province as we get into Sunday. But generally, we're not expecting all that much in terms of accumulation. That is mostly over now. Another area of high pressure moves down from the north as we get into Monday, making things clear once again for us. Winds are not going to pick up all that much with this high pressure in place. Sunday, when we get that cloud cover, we may see these gusts again kind of in that range of 40 to 50, especially through southern Saskatchewan. That'll make it feel likely closer to -30 during the day. And this jet stream pattern that you see here really going to remain in place as we head over these next few days. Again, staying to our south, you see these white colors, especially Sunday into Monday. I think we're in for another round of some pretty cold overnight lows, possibly extreme cold warnings issued once again. But the jet stream to our south means that the storm systems that ride the jet stream will stay out of the way and we'll actually get some sunshine. So as you can see there, temperatures, for Regina going to be quite cold, especially Monday there. But overall, we're looking for a pretty quiet week weather-wise other than the cold. Few nights, though, below -30. And again, that's likely where we're going to see those extreme cold warnings come back into play a little bit later into the week. Saskatoon, pretty similar picture here. I think Monday will be kind of the worst of the snap. Then we get a bit of a reprieve and then back down into those colder temperatures for Thursday and Friday. So overall, Dan, cold for the next week, but at least we get the sunshine back.
Are you going to get out and do any cross-country skiing? Even just Sunday looks like the best day.
Yeah, I think that'll probably be the best one. And if you can stand the wind, I think I might try to venture out.
Lots of great trails right now.
Yeah, for sure.
Thanks, Ethan.
You bet.
The Luther Invitational Tournament continued Friday with semifinal action on both the boys and girls side. This is the consolation semifinal between the Saskatoon Centennial Chargers and the Garden City Gophers from Winnipeg. Garden City ended up winning in the end, 82-56. The tournament continues Saturday, culminating with the girls' final at 6 and the boys' final at 8. Stick around, folks. Statistics Canada says our country added 76,000 jobs in January, 3 times what many analysts were predicting. Almost half the new jobs were in manufacturing, but Stats Can emphasized that that sector would be especially vulnerable to potential U.S. tariffs. Overall, the unemployment rate inched down 0.1 percentage point. 3 new faces have been added as independent senators to the Canadian Senate, including one from Saskatchewan. Todd Lewis is a familiar face to many in our province. Lewis is a 4th-generation farmer on his family farm near Gray, which is just south of Regina. He's also the former president of the Agricultural Producers Association of Saskatchewan, or APAS, and several other numerous agricultural foundations and committees. Martine Hebert of Quebec and Balte Dillon of BC are the other 2 new senators. Ethan's back with one last look at the weather. Ethan, how is it looking?
Cold, in a word. Extreme cold, in fact, through south and central. A lot of these lows tonight going to be around -30. And again, extreme cold warnings in place for many locations, including Regina and Saskatoon, as we feel closer to -40 as we get some clearing overnight. For northern Saskatchewan, actually, you might be the warmest part of the province as we go Friday into Saturday here, as we're kind of sitting into those mid-20s for the most part. Not a whole lot of relief on the way for Saturday. I think that's kind of where we'll end up for daytime highs as well in that part of the province. A little bit of some increasing cloudiness in eastern sections of the Churchill region. For south and central, again, starting the day pretty frigid, and I think the best that we'll do for much of Saturday will be temperatures getting around that -20 mark or upper -teens. But we are looking at some sunshine, and winds should stay fairly light for Saturday, Dan. So if there was ever a time to be winter hardy, this is the weekend for it.
Sure is. Thanks, Ethan. Have a good weekend.
You as well.
And before we go, a proud moment for a Saskatchewan freestyle skier on the international stage.
Maya Schwinghammer. Will she be the first to do that?
Saskatoon's Maya Schwinghammer took the bronze medal at a freestyle ski World Cup event in Utah on Thursday, finishing with a time of 27.88 seconds. This medal comes a week after Schwinghammer won her first career World Cup event in Quebec. Canadian skiers will compete in the Dual Moguls event in Saturday in Utah. And that is it for us tonight. I hope everybody has a great weekend. Sam and Ethan will be back on Monday. Good night, everybody.